My name is Natalie Greer, and I'm watching my former boss unravel on national television. The camera zooms in on Brandon Kellner's face as sweat beads along his hairline. He taps frantically at the tablet in his hands, his trademark confidence dissolving with each unsuccessful swipe. Behind him, the massive display screen flickers ominously, error messages multiplying like digital cancer cells across what should have been a flawless demonstration of Avera Dynamics' revolutionary AI system. As you can see, Brandon stammers, his voice cracking. Centra IQ is processing the simulated supply chain disruption and he stops mid-sentence as the screen behind him turns blood red. Warning messages cascade down in an endless waterfall of failure. The AI isn't just struggling, it's completely imploding, exactly as I predicted it would 6 months ago. I take a slow sip of my coffee, savoring both its bitterness and the moment. The financial news anchor looks bewildered, clearly unprepared for this spectacular technological meltdown happening during her primetime slot. The stock ticker at the bottom of the screen already shows Avera's shares dropping. Brandon Kellner, CEO of Avera Dynamics and master of stealing others' ideas, called me unnecessarily anxious when I warned about this exact scenario. He dismissed my concerns in front of the entire engineering department. "Natalie," he'd said with that condescending smile, "this is why I handle the big picture. You're getting lost in theoretical failure points that will never materialize in the real world." But here we are, in the very real world, watching those theoretical failure points materialize on live television. The irony isn't lost on me, neither is the satisfaction. My phone buzzes with an incoming text from Eliza, my former colleague at Avera. "Are you watching this?" I type back, "Every second." I lean back in my chair at the sleek offices of Voltaris Networks, where I'm about to present a system that actually works, a system I built, a system that will redefine the market that Brandon thought he could dominate with my stolen work. The AI disaster unfolding on television isn't just Brandon's humiliation, it's my vindication, and it's just the beginning. 6 months earlier, I sat in Avera's glass-walled conference room, surrounded by executives who understood enough about technology to be dangerous but not enough to recognize its limitations. I was the only woman at the table and the only person who had actually built the system we were discussing. The adaptive learning module I've developed allows Centra IQ to recalibrate in real time, I explained, pointing to my slides. But there's a critical vulnerability in how it processes conflicting data streams. If we rush this to market without addressing the cascade failure potential. "Natalie," Brandon interrupted, flashing that perfect smile that had charmed investors out of millions. "We appreciate your thoroughness, but we have delivery commitments to meet." I persisted. "The system needs at least 3 more months of testing. When multiple data points conflict, it can trigger a recursive error loop That's a corner case," Brandon waved dismissively. "Our clients need solutions now, not theoretical perfection." I felt my face flush. "It's not theoretical. I've documented it happening in controlled testing environments. If this occurs in a live system managing actual supply chains, the economic damage could be—" "I think what Natalie is trying to say," Brandon interrupted again, "is that she's done exceptional work getting us this far, and now we need to focus on implementation." He turned to the room. "Let's move forward with the rollout schedule as planned." I sat back, my warnings evaporating into the air-conditioned atmosphere of corporate indifference. I'd been with Avera for nearly 3 years, building their AI capabilities from a mere concept into the crown jewel of their technology portfolio. Yet increasingly, I found myself being edged out of presentations, my name disappearing from documentation, and my contributions minimized in company communications. After the meeting, Brandon caught up with me in the hallway. "Natalie, you're brilliant, everyone knows that. But you need to be more of a team player." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'd like you to report directly to me going forward. We can streamline the communication process that way." What he meant was, "I want to control your access to other executives and take credit for your work." "I appreciate the vote of confidence," I replied, shrugging off his hand. "But I'm concerned about rushing an unstable system to market." "Trust me," he said with a wink. "I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't know when to take calculated risks." The following weeks confirmed my suspicions. My team was gradually reassigned to other projects, while Brandon assembled a new group that he directly oversaw. They were given access to my code, my documentation, and my research, but I was kept at arm's length, brought in only for specific technical questions that no one else could answer. During a company-wide meeting, Brandon unveiled what he called the future of Avera, a comprehensive AI system for supply chain management that could predict disruptions, reroute resources, and self-optimize over time. As he described features I had designed and coded, I waited for some acknowledgement, some mention of my contributions. It never came. "This is Centra IQ," he announced proudly, "the culmination of Avera's innovation journey, a journey I had navigated, mapped, and largely traveled alone." After the presentation, I approached him directly. "Brandon, I need to speak with you about Centra IQ." "Isn't it fantastic?" he beamed. "The board is thrilled." "It's my work," I said quietly but firmly. "All of it. You didn't even mention my name." His expression hardened for a moment before settling back into its practiced conviviality. "Natalie, we're a team here. No individual can claim ownership of Avera's intellectual property. Your contributions are valued, but this is a company achievement. A company achievement that still has the critical vulnerability I've been warning about for months." He sighed theatrically. "I've had our new team review your concerns. They believe you're being overly cautious. They haven't built the system. They don't understand its architecture like I do." "Look," he said, checking his watch. "I have investors waiting. We can discuss this later if you'd like to schedule something through my assistant." As he walked away, I realized with perfect clarity that Avera, or more specifically, Brandon, would never acknowledge my work or heed my warnings. The decision I'd been contemplating for weeks crystallized in that moment. It was time to leave. But I wouldn't just walk away. I'd walk towards something better. That evening, I stayed late. Long after most employees had gone home, I meticulously backed up my research notes, design documents, and personal development logs, all material that predated my employment at Avera, and documented my independent conceptualization of the AI framework that became Centra IQ. I was careful to touch nothing that could be construed as proprietary to the company. I didn't need to. The fundamental innovations were mine, conceived before I joined Avera and developed largely through my own insights. I cleared my personal workspace, leaving only company-issued equipment behind. As I walked to the elevator with just my laptop bag, I felt oddly lighter. The security guard nodded as I passed. "Working late again, Ms. Greer?" "Not anymore, Hector," I replied with a small smile. "Not anymore." The next morning, I submitted my resignation via email, citing creative differences and a 2-week notice period. Brandon's response came within minutes. "Accepted. Effective immediately. Please coordinate with HR for exit procedures." No attempt to retain me. No questions about ongoing projects, just immediate severance, exactly what I'd expected. In Brandon's world, people were either assets or liabilities, and I had just moved from one column to the other. The following week, I registered Thorn Intelligence Systems LLC and filed preliminary patents for an enhanced version of the AI framework I'd developed. The core technology was mine, created before Avera, with significant personal improvements since, but I carefully documented the distinctions between my original work and what I'd developed while employed. I also began coding Orion, an AI system that would make Centra IQ look like a pocket calculator, where Centra IQ was rigid in its processing pathways. Orion was adaptive, where Centra IQ could identify problems. Orion could solve them, and most importantly, where Centra IQ was vulnerable to cascade failures. Orion was robust, with multiple fail-safe mechanisms and self-diagnostic capabilities. I worked from my apartment, converting the second bedroom into a development space. 18-hour days blurred together as I refined algorithms, enhanced learning modules, and implemented the critical error-handling capabilities that Brandon had dismissed as unnecessary. I lived on delivery food and too much coffee, emerging occasionally to remind myself that the outside world still existed. The work consumed me, but it wasn't just technical challenge driving me forward. It was the need to prove that I had been right, that my vision was valid, my warnings justified, and my abilities exceptional. Brandon had taken my work and dismissed my concerns. I would build something better and let the results speak for themselves. 2 months after leaving Avera, I began approaching potential clients. Most were hesitant to engage with a one-person company offering an unproven AI solution in a market dominated by established players like Avera, but I persisted, leveraging industry contacts and demonstrating Orion's capabilities through increasingly complex simulations. Then came the announcement that Avera would be unveiling Centra IQ on Future Forward, a nationally televised business and technology program. The press release touted it as a revolutionary leap in AI-driven supply chain management and featured Brandon prominently, positioned as the visionary behind the technology. I marked the broadcast date on my calendar and continued refining Orion. If Avera was rushing Centra IQ to market without addressing its fundamental flaws, they were setting themselves up for failure. I just hadn't expected it would happen quite so publicly. The day before the television appearance, I received an unexpected call from Catherine Lin, VP of Strategic Development at Voltaris Networks, Avera's largest competitor. "Ms. Greer," she said when I answered, "I understand you've developed an AI system for supply chain optimization." "I have," I confirmed, surprised. "May I ask how you heard about it?" "Silicon Valley is smaller than people think," she replied, "especially when someone who led AI development at Avera suddenly leaves to start their own venture. We're interested in seeing what you've built." The next morning, I presented Orion to Voltaris's executive team. Unlike the meetings at Avera, where technical details were often glossed over in favor of marketing potential, Voltaris's team asked incisive questions about architecture, scalability, and safeguards. "The most significant difference between Orion and other systems," I explained, "is its approach to conflicting data. When traditional AI encounters contradictory inputs, it typically defaults to programmed hierarchies or freezes while awaiting human intervention. Orion implements what I call diagnostic branching. It simultaneously explores multiple interpretation pathways while maintaining system stability." "And this prevents the cascade failures that can plague complex systems?" Catherine asked. "Exactly. Orion doesn't just avoid failures, it learns from near misses, continuously strengthening vulnerable pathways." By the end of the presentation, Catherine's expression had shifted from professional interest to undisguised enthusiasm. "We'd like to discuss integration possibilities, not acquisition partnership. Voltaris provides the infrastructure and client base. You maintain control of Orion's development." "That's exactly what I was hoping for," I admitted. "We've done our homework on you, Ms. Greer," Catherine said. "Your fingerprints are all over Avera's AI initiatives, despite their recent attempts to suggest otherwise. We value creators, not just their creations." As we finalized meeting details for the following week, Catherine added, "By the way, Avera's big reveal is today, isn't it, on Future Forward?" "It is," I confirmed. "Will you be watching?" "Wouldn't miss it." Which is how I found myself in a conference room at Voltaris, watching Brandon Kellner's career implode on national television. The demonstration had started smoothly enough, with Brandon eloquently describing how Centra IQ would revolutionize global supply chains. The host, Jessica Chen, seemed appropriately impressed by the slick visualizations and confident claims. "What we're going to show you today," Brandon announced, "is how Centra IQ handles a major supply chain disruption in real time. We've simulated a port closure in Singapore that affects thousands of shipments worldwide." On the massive screen behind him, a world map displayed shipping routes with a prominent red circle around Singapore. As the simulation began, the system started rerouting virtual shipments, calculating new arrival times, and adjusting resource allocations. "As you can see," Brandon continued, "Centra IQ instantly develops alternatives that minimize disruption. This would take a team of human analysts, PAs, to accomplish." Jessica nodded appreciatively. "And this is all happening automatically, no human intervention." "Completely autonomous," Brandon confirmed with a smile. "The system evaluates thousands of variables simultaneously to determine optimal solutions." That's when I noticed the first warning sign, a slight flicker in the display, as the simulation introduced a secondary disruption, a weather event affecting alternative shipping routes. This was exactly the type of conflicting data scenario I had warned about. "Now we're adding a tropical storm that impacts the rerouted shipments," Brandon explained, apparently oblivious to the brewing digital storm. "Centra IQ will recalculate to account for both disruptions." The screen hesitated, then began displaying rapidly changing route configurations. Brandon continued talking, but I could see confusion creeping into his expression as the system's behavior became increasingly erratic. Routes appeared and disappeared, cost calculations fluctuated wildly, and warning indicators began to multiply. "The system is evaluating all possibilities," Brandon said, his confident tone faltering. But it wasn't evaluating, it was spiraling. Each attempted solution created new conflicts that triggered additional recalculations in an accelerating feedback loop. Exactly the cascade failure I had predicted. Jessica looked concerned. "Is this normal behavior for the system?" "It's processing an unusually complex scenario," Brandon replied, frantically tapping on his control tablet. "Let me just—" That's when the screen turned red with warning messages. The simulation had collapsed entirely, and error notifications indicated that the failure had propagated beyond the demonstration environment into connected systems. "We seem to be experiencing a technical difficulty," Brandon said, his voice strained. "This is actually a valuable demonstration of our fail-safe protocols." But there were no fail-safe protocols. I had designed them, but they'd been deemed unnecessary and left unimplemented. Jessica, to her credit, maintained professional composure. "Perhaps we could take a brief break and come back to the demonstration." "Absolutely," Brandon agreed too quickly. "These cutting-edge systems sometimes—" He was interrupted by his own tablet emitting a shrill alert tone. His face drained of color as he read whatever message had appeared. "We'll return after these messages," Jessica announced as the program cut to commercial. In the Voltaris conference room, Catherine turned to me. "Was that what I think it was?" I nodded. "Cascade failure, propagating through interconnected systems. They're lucky if it only affected the demonstration environment." My phone began buzzing with messages from former colleagues still at Avera. According to them, the failure had indeed spread, triggering false alerts throughout their testing infrastructure and forcing emergency shutdowns of multiple servers. The company's internal communication systems were flooded with panicked messages, and executives were scrambling to contain both the technical disaster and the public relations nightmare unfolding in real time. When Future Forward returned from commercial break, Brandon was noticeably absent. Jessica explained that due to technical challenges, the Centra IQ demonstration would be postponed to a future episode. The program quickly pivoted to its next segment, but the damage was done. Social media was already erupting with clips of the failure, and financial news tickers reported Avera's stock dropping precipitously. Catherine closed the video feed and turned to me with newfound respect. "I believe you mentioned concerns about cascade failures in these types of systems." "I did," I confirmed. "Orion was specifically designed to prevent them." "I think we should accelerate our partnership discussions," she said. "How quickly can you prepare for a full technical review?" "I'm ready whenever you are." As we walked toward her office to discuss details, my phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender, Brandon Kellner. Subject: "We should talk." I ignored it and focused on the future, my future taking shape with each step forward. The aftermath of Centra IQ's public failure unfolded with the predictable rhythm of corporate damage control. Avera issued a statement claiming the demonstration had used pre-release software and assuring stakeholders that the commercial version would be fully stabilized. Brandon made no public appearances, and the company's stock continued its downward trajectory despite the reassurances. Meanwhile, my partnership with Voltaris progressed rapidly. Their technical team was impressed by Orion's architecture, and particularly by the robust fail-safe mechanisms I had implemented. We agreed on terms that maintained my ownership of the core technology while licensing it exclusively to Voltaris for supply chain applications. A week after the television disaster, I received another email from Brandon, more urgent than the first. "Natalie, we need to discuss IP ownership immediately. Please call me." Instead of calling, I had my newly retained lawyer send a formal letter outlining my pre-Avera development work and the clear distinctions between Centra IQ and Orion. Attached were notarized documentation, early design journals, and academic papers I had published that established my conceptual framework years before joining Avera. Brandon's response came through Avera's legal department, a thinly veiled threat, claiming ownership of all related intellectual property and demanding I cease development of derivative works. My lawyer was unconcerned. "They're posturing," she said. "Your documentation is solid, and they know it. They're hoping you'll get scared and settle." I had no intention of settling. 2 days later, Thorn Intelligence Systems filed a formal complaint alleging that Avera had misappropriated my intellectual property and requesting an injunction against their use of specific algorithms I had developed independently before my employment. The technology press, already feasting on Avera's public embarrassment, seized on this new development. Articles appeared questioning the originality of Centra IQ and highlighting my role in its creation, a role Avera had carefully minimized in their marketing. Former colleagues began speaking anonymously to journalists, confirming that I had been the primary architect of the system and had warned about its vulnerabilities. 3 weeks after the failed demonstration, with Avera's stock down 28% and clients beginning to withdraw from implementation contracts, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Natalie, it's Brandon. Please don't hang up." I said nothing, waiting. "Look, this has gotten out of hand," he continued, his voice lacking its usual polish. "We both want what's best for the technology. I'm calling to suggest we find an amicable resolution." "I'm listening," I said. "Come back to Avera as Chief Technology Officer. Full creative control, public recognition, compensation package of your choosing. We'll issue a joint statement clarifying your foundational role in Centra IQ's development. And the legal claims. We drop everything. Clean slate." I considered his offer for a moment. Why would I abandon Orion and my partnership with Voltaris to return to a company that dismissed my concerns and erased my contributions? Because Avera has the resources and client base to make this technology truly global, he argued. Voltaris is playing catch-up. Together, we could— "There is no together, Brandon," I interrupted. "There never was. You made that clear when you took my work and called it yours. I was protecting the company's interests. You were protecting your image as a technical visionary when you're nothing but a salesman with good hair." The line went silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his tone had hardened. "You're making a mistake. Avera won't just roll over on this." "Neither will I. And unlike you, I actually understand how the technology works." I ended the call and blocked his number. Whatever legal battles lay ahead, I was prepared. The truth was on my side, documented in code and design specifications that clearly showed my contributions, and Avera's subsequent modifications that had removed critical safeguards against exactly the type of failure that had occurred. The integration of Orion into Voltaris's infrastructure proceeded smoothly. Unlike Centra IQ's rushed development, we took time to properly test and validate each component before proceeding to the next phase. Catherine proved to be an ideal partner, providing resources without imposing arbitrary deadlines or marketing-driven compromises. 3 months after the disastrous television appearance, Voltaris announced VolSync powered by Orion, a comprehensive supply chain management system that emphasized reliability and adaptive learning. The press release prominently featured my name and highlighted my role as the architect of the underlying technology. Initial client implementations were limited in scope but successful, with the system demonstrating its ability to handle complex disruptions without the catastrophic failures that had plagued Centra IQ. As positive results accumulated, more clients signed on, many defecting from Avera's troubled rollout. The legal dispute between Thorn Intelligence and Avera settled quietly after preliminary discovery revealed the extent of my pre-employment work and the internal emails documenting my warnings about system vulnerabilities. The terms weren't disclosed publicly, but they included a substantial payment to my company and an acknowledgement of my intellectual contributions. Brandon resigned from Avera shortly after the settlement, citing personal reasons and a desire to explore new opportunities. Industry rumors suggested he had been forced out by the board after the combined impact of the failed demonstration, the legal settlement, and the exodus of major clients to Voltaris. 6 months after I had watched Brandon sweat on national television, I sat in my new office at Thorn Intelligence, now a thriving consulting firm specializing in AI system design and implementation. While Voltaris retained exclusive rights to Orion for supply chain applications, I was free to adapt the core technology for other sectors, from healthcare to financial services. My phone chimed with a news alert. Voltaris reports record quarterly growth. Attributes success to VolSync implementation. I smiled and turned to my computer, where I was developing a new neural network architecture that would make Orion seem primitive by comparison. This time, there was no question about who would get the credit or the warnings about potential failures. My name is Natalie Greer, and I build systems that work. The world now knows it, not because I shouted it from rooftops, but because I let my work speak for itself. In the end, that's the only voice that truly matters. 6 months later, I found myself sitting in a studio at Bloomberg Technology, preparing for a live interview. The green room was comfortable but sterile, with its requisite fruit plate and bottled water. A monitor on the wall showed the current segment a discussion about emerging AI regulations in Europe. "Ms. Greer, they're ready for you," a production assistant said, appearing at the door. I followed her through the labyrinth of corridors to the main studio, where the host, Daniel Park, greeted me with a firm handshake. "Thanks for joining us today," he said as a makeup artist made final adjustments to his appearance. "We've been trying to get you on the show for months." "I've been busy," I replied with a smile. "Building the future. From what I hear," he gestured to the chair across from him. "We're live in 30 seconds. As the countdown reached 0, Daniel turned to the camera with practiced ease. "Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm joined now by Natalie Greer, founder of Thorn Intelligence and the architect behind Orion, the AI system that's reshaping supply chain management through its implementation in Voltaris Network's VolSync platform. Natalie, thank you for being here." "Thank you for having me," I replied, conscious of the millions potentially watching. "Your story has become something of a legend in tech circles," Daniel continued. "You developed groundbreaking AI technology, left Avera Dynamics when your warnings about system vulnerabilities were ignored, and then watched as their system failed spectacularly during a live demonstration. Meanwhile, your version of the technology has helped Voltaris capture significant market share. Is that an accurate summary?" "The core technology has certainly proven its value," I said diplomatically. "Let's talk about that infamous demonstration," Daniel pressed. Avera's stock dropped nearly 30% in the aftermath. Were you surprised by the system's failure, or was it exactly what you had predicted? "I had identified specific vulnerabilities related to how the system handled conflicting data streams," I explained. "Without proper safeguards, complex AI systems can enter recursive error states, what we call cascade failures. Unfortunately, that's what viewers witnessed. And yet you've never publicly discussed Avera's misappropriation of your work, despite court documents suggesting you were the primary developer of what they called Centra IQ. Why maintain that silence?" I considered my answer carefully. Innovation isn't about claiming credit. It's about creating systems that work. The market is quite efficient at recognizing value and distinguishing between substance and hype. Daniel nodded appreciatively. "Speaking of market recognition, Voltaris has now surpassed Avera in market capitalization, largely on the strength of VolSync's performance. Their quarterly report specifically credits your Orion system with a 27% improvement in supply chain efficiency for clients. Did you anticipate this level of impact?" "The potential was always there," I said. "AI isn't magic. It's careful engineering with attention to both possibilities and limitations. When implemented responsibly, these systems can transform operations in ways that were previously impossible." "And what about Brandon Kellner? Avera's former CEO has virtually disappeared from public view since his resignation. Have you had any contact with him?" "No," I said simply, seeing no value in elaborating. "One final question," Daniel said, leaning forward slightly. "You could have gone public with your story much earlier, given interviews explaining how your warnings were ignored and your contributions minimized. Why didn't you?" I smiled. "The truth doesn't need me to shout it from rooftops. It reveals itself in quarterly reports, in system performance, in the code I've written. Success is the best vindication." Daniel seemed satisfied with this answer. "Well, the numbers certainly speak for themselves. Natalie Greer, thank you for joining us today." As the segment ended and my microphone was removed, I caught sight of the financial ticker scrolling across the bottom of the monitor. Voltaris up 3.2% on expanded VolSync implementation. A production assistant escorted me back through the corridors. "That was great," she said enthusiastically. So refreshing to hear someone in tech who doesn't just hype everything. Thank you, I replied. In the green room, I gathered my belongings and checked my phone. Among the emails and notifications was a news alert about Avera's latest quarterly report, their third consecutive disappointing performance. The accompanying analysis noted that their AI division continued to struggle with implementation challenges following the Centra IQ debacle. I put my phone away and headed for the exit. As I walked through the lobby, a large screen displayed various financial news headlines. One caught my eye before the doors closed behind me. Lessons from AI failures when technology outpaces understanding. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street. My driver was waiting at the curb, ready to take me to the airport for my flight to Singapore, where Voltaris was hosting a technology summit. I had been invited to deliver the keynote address. As we pulled away from the curb, I looked back at the Bloomberg building, thinking about Daniel's final question. Why hadn't I gone public earlier with my story? The answer was simple: I didn't need to. Systems can be reprogrammed, but trust, once broken, is much harder to restore. Brandon had learned that lesson the hard way. I preferred to let my work speak for itself, and it was speaking volumes. My phone buzzed with a message from Catherine. Caught your interview. Perfect balance of grace and steel. Board is thrilled with the partnership. I smiled and typed back, just getting started. The car merged onto the highway toward the airport. Ahead lay Singapore, new implementations of Orion, and the continued evolution of technologies I had only begun to explore. Behind me was Avera, Brandon, and the vindication I had once craved but no longer needed. The systems we build reflect who we are, our values, our foresight, our understanding of complexity. Centra IQ had been built on shortcuts and showmanship. Orion was built on solid foundations and respect for limitations. The results spoke for themselves. My name is Natalie Greer, and I build systems that work, not for glory or validation, but because getting it right matters. In technology, as in life, integrity isn't proclaimed, it's demonstrated, day after day, in the quiet reliability of things that simply work as they should. The sun dipped toward the horizon as we continued toward the airport, casting everything in the golden light of late afternoon. I turned away from the window and opened my laptop, already thinking about improvements to Orion's neural network architecture. The past was settled. The future was waiting to be built. And this time, I would build it on my terms.